economy. We have had the opportunity to hear from some of our federal leaders, to hear from practitioners in the field from across the United States, to hear from business partners from across the country. So to begin this next panel, I would like to welcome our moderator for this conversation, Steve Clemons, the founding editor-at-large of Semafor. And please welcome Governor Wes Moore, the 63rd Governor of Maryland, in conversation with Steve. Thank you. Joining him will be Randi Weingarten, president of AFT and the Albert Shanker Institute.
We're going to let Randi ask some questions too.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Randi, why don't you sit in the middle? Yeah, we're gonna eat you alive here. Here, Randi. There you go. And then let me get you this.
Okay.
Great. We have very high tech. Governor Moore, thank you. And I want to thank Randi for helping us to put on the dock this question of how to unlock and unstrand talent.
Yes.
And get it connected. You know, I'm somebody who's been obsessed for a long time about how to get our national economic agenda right and not leave people behind in it and kind of move it. And Governor, you and I had a very good time. I had a good time. I don't know if you did.
I did.
When I interviewed you with Semafor. And at that time, you talked about your disappointment in how slow and you know, sort of relatively unperforming the Maryland economy had been.
Yes.
And I'd just like to hear from you and have you share with our team how this topic, you didn't talk about experiential education because of this forum, but you went out there and you just did it on your own. So how does that connect to how you think about Maryland's aspirations, the economy, and what you want yourself to be measured by when we take a look at what you've done, you know, a couple of years from now?
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, and thank you, Randi. I mean, this is a joy for me, and I truly appreciate it. And
well, just at the beginning, it is.
No, it will be throughout. But also, I mean, this is something I love talking about because it was so necessary for our state to take seriously and get moving on. If you do not have a participatory economy, you do not have a growing economy. And there were so many random and arbitrary and frankly miserly policies and barriers that continue to stand in place in order for people to be able to participate in our economy. And so when I was first inaugurated, Maryland was ranked 47th in economic momentum. Our economy had grown by 0.2% over the past 5 years. Right, so it's not that our economy was stagnant.
How did that compare to the neighborhood?
So if you look at the other states, the average state over the same period of time grew by 7.5%.
So you're talking Delaware,
yes,
Pennsylvania,
going up to Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, 7.5%. Maryland had grown by 0.2. Right, so it's not even just that we were stalled. I mean, they're stagnant. We were just completely stalled. And part of the challenge was, if you look at what happens on the other end, Maryland, when I was first inaugurated, was ranked 43rd in unemployment. So you did not have pathways for people to be able to participate. You had a skill set gap that people weren't able to fulfill. And so we just made it our core focus, saying, we have got to get this economy going. We've got to make sure that we have more people participating in the economy. We've got to make sure that we have better pathways for people to be able to go into these growth industries that Maryland had. And you know, there's top industries that Maryland should be a leader in. But if you're not creating the right kind of educational pathways in order for people to participate, then what exactly are you doing? And you have this massive disconnect. And so it is true. We were very intentional about being able to remove the barriers that continue to allow people, to keep them from participating. Things like where we have some of the best four-year colleges in America in the state of Maryland, something that I'm very proud of. But we are very intentional. In fact, I said it during my inaugural address. We are going to end this myth that every single one of our students must attend one of them in order to be economically successful. It's just not true. That we are going to create additional pathways and get more young people involved with skill set building and development. And that's why Maryland is now the first state in this country that offers a service year option to every single one of our high school graduates.
So I want to get Randi in this in a second, but I want you to tell us what that is, because when I read it, it was kind of breathtaking. Every single student gets that, opportunity to make that choice and go into it. So, I mean, really explain it in its grit, because when I didn't know it when we had met before, but how is that being received, and how is it beginning to change the contours? Because I have to say that when I was listening to forums up here, commentary up here, what was the guy's, I should know all of our speakers' names, but Michael Mulgrew from, UFT, and Randi were up here earlier saying that the accountability system within the high school system doesn't allow teachers to actually robustly provide pathways in the experiential side. They're kind of screwed if they succeed in this. And so I'm just interested in how you've changed the alignment of stars.
Yeah, and part of it is, and I think that's exactly right, part of it is we're literally grading our high schools based on your 4-year college acceptance rate.
Exactly right.
I'm sorry, why is that a prerequisite to show what a good school is or what a good high school is? If that's not the pathway for all of our students to be able to attend, and I think about it in my case, I did not attend a 4-year college when I first got out. When I first, I was 17 years old when I joined the Army, right? I say, I wasn't even old enough to join by myself. My mother had to sign the paperwork for me because I was still a minor. But after my teenage years, she would sign whatever paperwork that the Army put in front of her. But I was a non-traditional student. I went to a 2-year college. Right? So it's like, I just don't, Einstein had this thing where he talked about this idea of if you tell a fish that the definition of genius is to climb a tree, then that fish will always feel like it's insufficient. Right? And that's what we're doing. And so the reason that we wanted to focus on this service year, and so for Maryland high school graduates, or people with GEDs or graduate equivalencies, they now have a chance to have a year of service to the state of Maryland. And they can choose however they want to do it. We have some of our people working in the environment, some people working in helping returning citizens, some people who are helping young people, some people who are helping veterans, and it is totally their choice. And we really did it for a few different reasons. One is we're big believers in experiential learning. If you can give young people a chance to find their thing that makes their heart beat a little bit faster, you're going to be able to find a young person who then becomes fired up for what the next stage of their life is going to be. The second reason is because I believe, that this really became one of the best workforce development tools that we had, particularly for those young people between those ages of 18 and 23, where it is a bit more complicated for them oftentimes to figure out what does the next step of life look like. And I don't think it should be, lost on anybody. It's not lost on us that, when I was first inaugurated, that Maryland was ranked 43rd in unemployment. Now, for the 5th month in a row, Maryland has amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country.
Wow.
And I think the other big thing is that, why this was so important for us is in this time of this political divisiveness and this political vitriol, in this time where people are so separated by political ideologies, I'm just a big believer that service will save us. That if we can be a state that gets to know each other again, if we can be a state that works on big projects together again,
right,
that is going to be how our state is going to move past this moment where frustration and political divisiveness just seems to be the cause of the day.
Randi?
So I'm looking at Stan for a second as you're talking, Governor, to make the point that it really does require governors to do this stuff. Stan and I served on a commission, a Cuomo commission, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, and maybe longer, where I raised the issue of having service learning for all kids. First off...
And was Stan the opponent?
No, he
Okay.
was the chair who agreed with me, but
Just wanted to get that right.
So many other people in the commission were like, well, that's not what schools should be doing. And
Well,
we didn't... Wait, let me...
But it raised the question, but who are the villains in this story?
No,
Why is
let
the
me-
story
let-
taken, yeah.
Let me finish this for a second, because I want to say something good about what, if I may, sorry,
Yes,
if I may,
okay.
which is that it was not in the imagination, so it's not villains, it's not in the imagination, because the imagination at that point was, oh, no. We just have to get kids through high school, get them good enough grades, they go to college. And so this notion of a service year, which frankly, rich kids get in terms of when they take a gap year.
Exactly right.
And but then, so when I saw that the governor had gotten this done, I was like, wow. For all the reasons he just said, the passion meets purpose, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of critical thinking and all the different things, relationship building, and being able to talk to people who you may not agree with and who may not agree with you, and instead of punching them out, you're talking to people. All of the basically life skills that we in schooling should be helping in a really equal way so that anyone, regardless of where they start, could actually have this opportunity. That's experiential learning at its best. That's also what Career Tech Ed does. That's what Raphael does in his classrooms. So, but the reason you need governors is because education is so fragmented throughout this country that a governor is going to have more weight in terms of changing an educational system than virtually anyone else in the system. So thank you.
So, Governor, let me ask you, when it comes to experiential education and the kind of campaign that you've been on, how has it been received? And when I ask about, villains in this, part of it's sort of soft villains. I have some friends in the media here, and we're always looking for somebody to blame for something, constructively blame. But I think, in the process of this, as you sort of look at resources in the state, what you've committed to on taxes and all this, is this an affordable thing, and are people saying, hey, this is the wrong way to put resources?
No, in fact, I think we've been able to show in our state that we can do big things.
Right.
If you look at, we made the single largest investment in childcare in our state's history. We have now a service year option for all of our high school graduates. We made the single largest investment in public education in the history of the state of Maryland, and we did it all, and we did not have to raise taxes, right? So I think we're showing that you can actually have a measurement of fiscal discipline and also still go get very big things done. It's about how you think about and prioritizing this work. And so, and I agree with Randi. I don't think it was a villain per se, but I think it's asking us to change our definition of success.
Exactly right.
Where I just think that over these past 20 years, 30 years, there was this idea that somehow you must go on to get a 4-year degree in order to be economically successful. And people showed the stats, and we all saw the statistics that show, if a person has a 4-year degree, they'll end up, achieving over $1 million more over the lifetime of their career. And so that became the standard. That became the thing that everyone tried to move towards. All we were simply saying was this, that, the people who are pushing that, congratulations, you won the last 2-3 decades in terms of the conversation, the narrative. But it's not the only option. And so by simply saying that, yes, we are going to make sure we're supporting our 4-year schools and those students who attend it, we are going to support our community colleges and those who attend our community colleges. And at the same time, if there's a young person who makes the decision and says, that's not going to be my path. And I remember a young man who I met over at Western Tech, which is a high school in Baltimore County, and an apprenticeship high school in Baltimore County. He said, I knew when I was in 9th grade, I did not want to go to college. I knew it. And so now he's working in advanced manufacturing. This was his magnet throughout high school. He's now about to finish high school. He already has job offers that literally is going to pay him 6 figures in his first year. Guess what? He won. Congratulations. Right? And so, but if we looked at it through the old prism, someone would say, well, what's wrong with him? Nothing.
Well, look, we didn't tell Governor Moore this is kind of like the Tonight Show, my style. There are many young people here who don't remember Johnny Carson, but Johnny Carson had Ed McMahon, and Randi is my Ed McMahon in this, and I'm Johnny. And we've got a special guest who came in, of course, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who just got a 1,019-page bill on his desk that he's going to read by tomorrow. And they've got votes today on funding the U.S. government or 6 agencies. But, I wanted to build Senator Whitehouse. You all know the senator from Rhode Island who is up this term, but he has done more than any other United States senator. And I think this is a fair statement to sort of raise the issue about public ethics and to begin looking at the problem of corruption in government and raise the visibility around our institutional social contract. And when Randi and I and others were talking about the experiential education, the economy, and others, and I was just so taken with my conversation with Governor Wes Moore a while back about the social contract and how it, in my view, that social contract works for a portion of the population, but not enough of the population. So I just wanted to invite Senator Whitehouse in for 14 minutes. He has a hard out in about 14 minutes. And I want to give, so Sheldon, I'd like to hear the public ethics dimensions of our institutional commitment on education and tell us where we should go.
Well, first of all, great to be here with the governor.
Do you guys like
a mere
each other?
senator and an actual governor. It's so
No, I
thrilling
mean,
for
do you
me.
really like each other?
And I
Did you
absolutely-
campaign? Did you have a robocall against Westmore?
Here's who I
Yeah,
really like.
okay,
I really like
Okay.
Randi, and our RIAFT has
Right.
been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful group to work with for a long time. So I'm feeling quite blessed to be here. I would say that we are going through kind of a moment in our country about ethics and corruption. Ethics and corruption in the old days was just one person doing one bad thing and maybe they got caught and maybe they went to jail. Now it's a whole institutionalized thing in which being corrupt is a sort of political way of life. Lying about what is going on is the main job of very enormous TV and other news outlets. And it puts real pressure on kids to figure out that they're working in a different environment. I remember in my generation, the Cuyahoga River caught fire. And everybody realized, oh, crap. This pollution stuff is different than we thought. And we had a societal mind change about pollution. And when I started going to health food stores, there were people that had like their shoes backwards and everything was in a bin and you had to bring your own scooper. Now it's, Whole Foods and it's a mega industry and we've changed the way we think about our food. We've changed the way we think about pollution. We need to start training up kids to have a better sense of what is polluting their information diet, what is the junk food in their information diet, and they have to operate in a world in which grown-ups are persistently lying to them, which was not something that we saw so
You
much
just
of
said something very
before.
important. Can I have the students that are here as as examples, metaphors, living metaphors of experiential education and journalism stand up for a minute? Can you guys stand up? So as part of the message of thinking about how people get into a profession and live that profession, an apprenticeship, or what you call experiential education, I want to tell you that what Senator Whitehouse just said about reporting more broadly this, but he's also a powerful guy. So is Governor Moore. These are the people you have to hold accountable. Do you like that, or do you welcome the fact that they're going to go after you both?
Totally.
And so
That's what we're here for. That's my job. and yes, and I think that, again, when people get active, it's really important to understand what's motivating them and is it truthful? Because a lot of the stuff that the governor and I get presented with is fake. It's ginned up. It's phony. And people need to, as part of their education, they need to be trained and prepared to deal with systematic lying by very powerful forces.
Get Governor real quick, and then Randi.
No, I totally agree because, I think about when people ask me when I was first getting into this, I'd never run for office before running for governor for my state, and people said, well, what made you want to get into politics?
You're going to keep doing it, or?
Oh, yeah, it feels pretty good now.
We hope so.
but and it's, thank you. But, and people said, well, what made you want to get into politics? And I was like, I didn't. I wanted to be the governor. Because you just felt governor is it is, and Randy's right, it's a unique role. But also, it is this idea where when people talk about politics and policy and a frustration that I think a lot of people have, it's real. I say I had to get many members of my family to vote for me. And it's not because my family and I aren't cool. I mean, we're very cool. It's that for many members of my family, they hadn't voted. They just have felt disillusioned. And so there is a cynicism that I think everything the senator was talking about, like there is a cynicism about this system that we have to recognize as real, and a frustration.
So from the educator point of view, not from the AFT president point of view, two things about what they both just said. Number one, which is part of the reason why we are so into experiential learning, critical thinking, critical thinking, critical thinking. You know, we could immediately say, oh, we should have media literacy all over, but if we don't have critical thinking and a kid sees X on TikTok, for example, if that kid doesn't have the tools to say, well, is that true? Or what else am I seeing? And if we have not used the muscle to teach kids critical thinking, then it's just indoctrination. But the second piece that the governor said as well, which is part of the indoctrination, look, I'm an AP Gov teacher, is autocrats use apathy as a tool. They use apathy as a tool. It's not just disinformation as a tool, it's apathy. And part of what you're doing, Gov, in this work, you are making government credible and relevant for people. And so if they actually trust that what you're doing to help people succeed works, and they trust, Senator, what you're doing is helping people succeed, then that also pushes back on the autocrat and on the apathy. And so all of this gets interconnected because the people who are corrupt, they're going to have power regardless. They're just doing power in all sorts of different ways, which I would say 20 years ago we would have said, what? They have the audaciousness to do that? Yes, they do. But if we don't push back by making sure that kids have a sense of critical thinking and relationship building, and they have a different way, which is what you're doing, and create the trust in government, then we are sunk.
So let me ask you both a question. Senator, you first. You know, in 2016, I interviewed then Vice President Biden for The Atlantic, and he just, you know, I didn't expect it. I didn't ask him anything prompted. He just said out of the blue, he says, Steve, the problem with the Democratic Party is it had become a party of snobs. And so part of what I'm interested in this today is deconstructing snobbishness out there, or, you know, basically looking at folks who take one track versus another track, this kind of zero-sum game between communities. How do we begin, I mean, you were getting at it, Governor, but how do we begin sewing people back together so there is this sense of civitas, mutual commitment? You can have it out and argue all you want about different perspectives, but I think it gets into ethics and civic engagement and a belief that, you know, the minority view has rights. All of that dimension is what I think Vice President Biden was talking about. And one, I'd like to hear, Sheldon, do you agree with Joe Biden? And two, do you think there's a way through schools and education to diffuse that?
I don't. I look around the Democratic caucus in the Senate, and I don't see a snob anywhere. And if I look at the people who I know in my life who I think are snobs, they're as likely to be Republicans as they are Democrats. I just don't think that's a thing. I do think...
You just made news there, so that's good. No,
I do think that Democrats have not been as effective as we should have about telling the stories that matter to people and putting the villain in the story. So one of my crusades is on climate change,
right.
And it's not enough if you're going to engage people in the story to pat ourselves on the back and say what a wonderful thing the IRA was, like climate change is an excuse for a jobs program. It's great to have a lot of climate jobs, but at the end of the day, there is a massive industry out there that is making billions of dollars, spending billions of dollars in politics, and systematically lying to people about the danger that they face and their role in trying to make it better.
Right.
And you got to be able to tell people that truth, because otherwise, if that's snobbery, then I guess we are snobs, but I think it's different. I think this is just, we haven't been as energetic as we should be about laying out the whole story for people to understand.
And where do schools fit into that?
Schools fit into teaching kids to make sure that they are demanding the whole story, that they're understanding that there's a lot of secret money floating around, there's probably a nasty motive floating around, to be critical evaluators of the public information that they get. In the same way that people now look at pollution as a thing, but didn't used to. Smells Like Jobs was what smoke was. Or pay way more attention to their diets, and it's not just TV dinners any longer. We got to have that same adaptation, that same alertness to the pollution and the junk food that is now in our information diet, and understand that people are doing it on purpose.
I'm just going to pause right there, and I'm going to excuse Senator Whitehouse. We had a deal to get him on the road. You've got to leave by 12.
There is a vote waiting for me, and a lot of angry senators wondering why the hell I'm not there to close out
So
the
anyway,
vote.
I want to thank Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. This is Washington, folks. It's how it works. This is DC. You got to. If you all saw me and using my iPhone up here, it wasn't that I was being rude. It was that I was managing multiple motorcades at the same time. So I interrupted you, but I want to come back to the same question.
So I would say, I can't speak to what the president was saying about the individuals being snobs. I can tell you though that many of these policies have been snobbish, because that's exactly how we've incentivized it. I mean, we have policies that will tell schools or students that your funding or your ranking is based on things like four-year college acceptance rates. That's snobbish. That we have policies that allowed people to work jobs, and in some cases multiple jobs, and still live at or below a poverty line. That is snobbish. That there are policies that are in place when you have people who are working to get a second chance in life. People who are returning citizens, people who are coming from military service, and we're basically acting like the service that they did all of those years when it comes to transferable skill sets, that it doesn't matter because it doesn't translate into the way that we think about applicability and the way we think about usefulness. That is snobbish. So I can't speak to the individuals, but I can tell you right now, we find ourselves constantly having to upend snobbish policies.
Ed?
So,
That was a joke.
thank you. Thank you, Jimmy. Or Johnny.
Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny.
I just feel so bad for young people. They don't get it. And I'm going to, bring in old pictures of Ed McMahon and Johnny Carson, two of my heroes. Yeah.
As opposed to Stephen.
Ready to go. Yes, ma'am.
So I would argue, extending what the governor just said, trickle-down economics is snobbish. Because one of the things we don't teach in K-12 is, if people take a basic economics course, it's like their second semester senior year. But trickle-down economics basically says that the wealthy will stay wealthy, and hopefully they will trickle things down to everyone else. And what I think we're both trying to do is upend that and rewrite the rules to say that the mass of humanity should have options and opportunities. And you do that through education, and you do that through rewriting all of the economic rules so that there is an ability from high school on for kids to have all sorts of different options. But that's where experiential learning comes in. And that's where service learning comes in.
Well, let me ask you, Governor, about experiential education as a tool to attract investment into the state. And so we had Micron Technologies, a major semiconductor company, Microsoft, and Siemens on stage a little while ago at a union event, which is that in itself must be kind of historic. And I'm just sort of interested in the question of how it becomes a tool. And I'll just do one little vignette here. When I worked for Senator Jeff Bingaman in the 1990s, a Democratic senator from New Mexico, Intel at that time had come in and put one of its major fab plants in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. But the state had given away so much of its tax base to attract Intel in that Rio Rancho couldn't afford an elementary school. Intel bought and paid for the elementary school, and you might applaud that, but it also raises really important questions about governance, about social contract, about company towns, and it was something that became very controversial. So I'm really interested in what the right equilibrium is in education, in tax benefits, and attracting this new array of investment that's coming back into the United States or being created in the United States.
I mean, I think that level of partnership is going to be important. I think about it where even when we did the service share option, we had nonprofits and organizations, but do you know who some of the first people who signed up to say we'll take on the students were people in the private sector? Because it turned out that they were actually using it as essentially workforce development. Because they're like, wait a second, if you tell us we can get a young person who is going to get a whole suite of life skills, things like financial literacy, financial education, part of a cohort, working with other people, and they can then come on board and also receiving a stipend at the end of it, you had businesses who were like, sign me up. In fact, I'll take 3. Right? Because they saw it as part of a larger workforce development platform. And it helped to address an issue that our state was having where for every single person filing for unemployment in the state of Maryland, we had 2 available jobs, right? And people say, well, how does that make sense? It makes sense because there's a disconnect between the skill sets that people were getting and the skill sets that were necessary for the industries that we were growing in. Maryland right now, we are the home of U.S. Cyber Command. We're the home of the NSA. We're the home of Fort Meade. We're the new home of the FBI. Right? Maryland is the cyber capital.
You won that battle?
Oh, yes, and I'll say it again loud. We are the new home of the FBI. And so, which by the way is me worth over 7,500 jobs, over $4 billion of economic activity, but who's counting? But the reason I say that is this. Maryland is the home of cyber, right? Cyber is being built and developed and grows in the state of Maryland. So we have to make sure that we have an education system that's also creating that pipeline for those industries and that pipeline. So I think having that partnership with the private sector is something that we do think is important. Having the partnership where they want to be involved and they want to hire our young people coming out. We want that to be able to happen. And we think that's part of the reason that Progress Produces Partnership is part of the reason that we've gotten our economic engine going, because we're just being very deliberate about what are those industries, what are those areas, and then what role can our education system play in terms of helping to fulfill those slots.
Randi?
So, look, all morning long, we've been talking about all sorts of different problems, whether it's post-COVID, whether it's student attendance, whether it's joy or passion and what students bring with them, whether it's poverty, whether it's the pipeline not matching the work opportunities. We've been talking about all of these problems. And we come back to this one solution at least in K-12, and I would argue further on, and you saw that with Liz's panel as well. We can have an education strategy, whether it's service learning, whether it's career tech ed, whether it's civic engagement, whether it's dual coursework. We have an education strategy that can actually solve a lot of these problems. You saw the teachers from the beginning, the first panel, saying we want to do it. And so the key is, how do we change policy to make this happen? You heard Ro Khanna say, we spend $400 on academic education to every dollar in voc ed. That means it requires a change of policy. You heard me say earlier, and Michael.
It's 400 to 1?
He said 400 to 1. You heard Michael and me say earlier, if we have a national accountability process or paradigm that is about testing and about going to four-year colleges, you can't say to teachers, and you should do this. So that becomes the policy change that I think we are really trying to move towards.
I'm going to do something I've been wanting you to do this whole conference. She's been right in the front row. I mean, I believe, some of you are in the back row, and I respect that. But you've been in the front row all day, and I want to ask, give one opportunity in the last couple of minutes. You're my new friend. Is Jacqueline Lyons. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask a question.
My people forced me to be in the front row.
Who? Oh, they did?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, and you have a question for the governor?
I do, but I just want to make just a couple of comments. I want to thank the AFT. I particularly want to thank Randi Weingarten for giving our District of Columbia public school students an experience of a lifetime. I want to remind these students back here, because I was a history major, that Maryland was a slaveholding state, and we have right here
Oh, yes.
the first African-American governor
Yes.
of Maryland. And last, because I am a union woman, I want these students to understand that we have two of the major presidents of the two best unions in the United States, Randi and Liz, that were right here. That's something that my grandmother could never dream of. Not even.
I had no idea you were going to be so great.
Sorry. I had to say it. It's the history major.
And now the question, make it good.
And I'm sorry. Well, I know in the District of Columbia, as a union leader, we're starting to get a lot of money for teacher apprentice programs and medical CTE programs. Can you give me some suggestions on how do we make sure, excuse my language, that we don't bastardize the money that's coming in and that we keep labor and teacher voice at the table? Because that always becomes the problem.
Sounds like a great question to end on. Governor?
First, bless you. Bless you and thank you, and bless your students.
She's been in that seat all day, that one in that front row.
Yes, and I have to tell you, not just as a not just as a child of unions, my whole family, we are union strong, and we are so grateful for the work that you are doing. And honestly, I think that there's a bunch of things that we have to be able to do in order to make sure that that money is being used wisely and being used how it should be used. And part of that is it needs to be mandated. You know, I have, and I know, and not to get political, but I think about the work that this president has done, where I think this president has done remarkable work in making sure that, yes, we are going to open up opportunities through IRA, we're going to have opportunities through ARPA, we're going to have opportunities for states to be able to build roads and bridges and work on after-school programs and getting more mental health counselors and providers inside of classrooms and doing all these things, and there's significant capital that our states now have an ability to play with, right? But you're going to use union workers. You're going to make sure that these are American jobs. You're going to make sure, and it's the same type of thing that we just said, you know, one of the first things we did, we signed an executive order. One of the great things about being a governor, you can do executive orders. It's actually pretty great. But talking about the work and the capital that's happening on state projects that we are helping to underwrite, we put together programs and platforms for PLAs on that. Because if you are going to use state capital for these things, it's important that you use state workers. It's important that you utilize unions to be able to do the work. And so I think you can help to incentivize it. I think you can help to prioritize it. But I do think it is important for executives to be able to take that role of leadership seriously, that there are also places that you have to say it needs to be mandated. That if that work is going to happen, we need to be clear about who's doing the work and then who it's going to turn around and benefit.
Randi, you have a comment?
Look, culture trumps strategy every moment. And if we don't also change the culture to make it clear that our voice has to be at the table in a meaningful way, that it can't just be done to teachers or to the community. Community and teachers have to be at that table. So then you have a governor. Yes, DC has to become a state, by the way. That would be a good first step. But as the governor said, which is why I'm so honored to have this conversation, you have to have a squeeze this way and this way in order to change policy. And if not, the regular mores that we have been living with in the last 50 years are going to continue to happen, which is that just get good test scores, get enough kids to college, and the school system will look good, as opposed to what we're trying to say, and that's what those resources are about. How do we help each and every kid? How do we help create opportunities for each and every kid? How do we help each and every kid to engage in the pursuit of college, career, life, civic participation? And all of those opportunities are there because that one opportunity to become a teacher to become a phlebotomist may be amazing.
Look, I'm going to ask one last quick question. We're a little over here, and we've got food for you. Mary Catherine Ricker's going to come out and close us out. I guess do it while we're even up here, and we're just messing up the whole calendar. But I do want to ask, Governor, one of the things I'm very taken by are your efforts to go around parts of Maryland that may not have been supportive for you, and talk to people who were not on your page before. I'm interested in that because I think that we see a behavior in politics today, particularly at national politics, where one side screams more loudly at the other, and there's not a lot of listening. So you've gone on this listening tour, an engagement tour. Have you found anything that helps find, generate common ground or an ability to get different sides to listen to one another? Because you are doing that, but it's not often done, at least in my experience.
It's amazing because Maryland, there's something really interesting happening in Maryland right now. We're actually choosing to work together. And it's amazing what kind of results you're getting from it. We ended up, and it's true, I ended up literally when I first started the race, I was polling at 1%. By election day, we ended up winning with more individual votes than anyone who'd ever run for governor in the history of the state of Maryland. But the reason I bring that up is this. You don't get to the numbers that we got by just winning Democrats. We won Democrats, we won independents, and we won a big chunk of Republicans. And the reason was simple. We showed up. We went all across the state. And the thing that I promised each and every person, and I said, get used to it, because we're going to be back. And I think when you look at what's now happened, where we're about to complete our second legislative session. In our first legislative session, not only did we go 10 for 10 on all the bills that we introduced, we went 10 for 10 bipartisan. We got Democrat and Republican supports on every single bill that we introduced, to include things like raising a minimum wage, to include things like making the child tax credit permanent.
Well,
right. And now this year we've introduced 16 bills, and we're not there yet, but we're feeling pretty good. We're about to repeat it again. There's something special happening, and the reason is simple: show up and make your case.
So first of all, big round of applause for Randi Weingarten. Second of all, big round of applause for Governor Wes Moore. Thank you so much. And Mary Catherine, you're going to close this out. We got a lunch, something going on. Why don't you thank the governor too? You can all thank the governor.
It would be my pleasure. Governor Moore, Randi, Steve, thank you so much for the invigorating conversation. Quite frankly, it is inspiring and motivating, right? And you can sit and be inspired, but motivation means you get up out of your seat and you do something about it. And you've given us incredible practical tools to do next that Jackie's going to take away with her. You have given us really motivating tools. And Randi, you have featured so many strong stories that, again, I think stitched together, this is, again, inspiring. It is motivating. And thank you for your visionary leadership. Thank you for the invigorating discussion. Steve?
Jackie, next year ought to be on a panel.
Oh, yes. She graciously demurred to a practicing classroom teacher this morning, I will have you know, as a strong union leader does. And I would really love to make sure we thank the staff of Historic 6th and I, an incredible team.